Hey y'all, welcome back to this week's episode of AMA Friday with Amy Miller, Recruiting in Yoga Pants. This week we are doing our first deep dive into what is an ATS good for anyway, why companies use them. All right, last week, if you've not seen that video, go ahead and check it out. I will link to it up above. But last week we talked through just an overview. I gave y'all a quick little summary, highlight, little kind of, path of the recruiting life cycle, which is really the goal of an ATS and why companies invest in this kind of software, because we need a way to track all of these steps from opening a requisition, accepting applications, interviewing, documenting, follow-up, scheduling, making an offer, accepting the offer, and onboarding. All this stuff happens in an ATS, y'all, and it all starts with opening a new role. Let's get into it. Do you know what hiring managers and candidates have in common? I'll tell you. They both have to enter information into a system that they do not use often and that they hate. I live in my ATS all day, every day. I've got like 27 tabs open at any given time, and that's conservative. Okay, I'm in it all the time. Hiring managers, not so much. They get in there when I make them. They get in there when they have to open a new role. They get in there when they have to look at resumes for an existing role. So if they're actively hiring, hopefully they're in there at least every couple days. But for the most part, if you're a kind of not super busy manager who's not recruiting a whole ton, you've got a big stable team, you're maybe going in there a few times a year. And you don't like it. So I get it. But it is important because that role creation is what kicks off that recruiting life cycle. I know a lot of you are going to ask about fake jobs, evergreen jobs, bullshit jobs that aren't real. Fair questions. We will address that in a future video. I want to really get into the mechanics of how the ATS navigates these things, and then we'll deal with some of the other sidebar stuff. So feel free to drop comments down below. Let me know what you want to know about this part of the process, but I do want to just, again, focus on the mechanics behind it. So a hiring manager has been told you can go hire 3 more people. That's your spend for this year. You have a team of 12. You can be up to 15 by the end of the year. You've got 3 recs to go and fill. Go for it. Okay, cool. Step 1, you're going to go into your ATS and you're going to start working on a new requisition. So what does that look like? Depending on how the company is set up, some companies may actually have that headcount tracked within the ATS. More commonly, they have another third-party tool or a separate tool that is more like maybe a finance tool. Maybe it lives within, a different part of the organization. It's not the actual ATS itself, but it feeds into the ATS, right? Like the ATS can actually pull data, kind of like a CRM for like prospects and things, which we've talked about in a previous video, Dude, Where's My Data? But in some companies, they may have like a finance system or an HRIS system where that stuff lives, and then that feeds the ATS. So it actually says, okay, yeah, Bob, the manager, has 3 roles that they can fill. So Bob can actually go into the ATS and select their position and then start filling in the gaps. This is where it's similar to your application. There's going to be things that are a drop down. Much like you can pick the kind of degree that you have, whether it's none, associates, bachelor's, master's, PhD. Same thing with the job family. Is it hardware engineer? Is it software engineer? Is it a program manager? Is it a technical program manager? There's going to be a list of drop downs that are available to that hiring manager, and they pick the one that makes sense. And then that creates another menu of drop downs, which level, which location, which business group, things like that. So there's all these little identifiers that help to create our requisition. Once that information is entered, now you have some free-form stuff that you can add yourself. Kind of like on your application, you can actually type in work history. You can actually copy and paste if it didn't parse well. You can actually go in and edit some of those things if you like. So job descriptions are similar. Now, depending on the organization, there may be internal policies, or they may want everyone to use the same, everybody use like the same opening paragraph, or, everyone use this same pay transparency language or whatever. So it just depends on how the company's set up. Sometimes those things can be auto-populated. Sometimes we have to actually type them in. Sometimes, again, we have a drop-down or something that we can choose from. A lot of times we are copying previous roles. This is also a complaint we see occasionally. I'm okay with that. I don't mind the copy paste exercise as long as the information is still accurate. As long as, we still have whatever it is we're saying, right? That hasn't changed. Every now and again, I have to go and adjust like compensation, make sure that it's the new ranges were picked up, or we have a new location. I might have to go get that added, right? Things like that. So, but the company should be able to, or the hiring manager should be able to go in and either select from predetermined stuff, options, or they can actually fill it in themselves. Either way is fine. Usually it's a mix of both. So now once that information is entered and I've put in all the data, I've added my description, I've listed my basic qualifications, now it goes through an approval process. The recruiter is usually the first approver. That approval chain can be one person, it could be 6 or 7 people. Again, variables here include how the company is structured, the specific policies, how tightly, they look at headcount, things like that. I know for my roles, so the positions that you see me posting, they go through at least probably a 4 to 6 person approval process. That's recruiting, that's finance, that's legal, and that's business leadership. So in this example, Bob's boss, my boss, finance person, lawyer. Like there are a lot of people who are going in and sanity checking different things and making sure that what we're publishing is accurate. Okay? So all those steps are followed. Everybody does their homework. Everybody does their due diligence. Everybody is like checks and balancing against, yes, this is headcount we're allowed to spend. Yes, this is an approved, description. No, we're not using any, keywords or internal violating NDA kind of stuff. And yes, we've followed whatever local, state, or federal guidelines are required as far as postings. That could be as simple as OFCCP, making sure those basic qualifications are truly minimum and truly role related. This is also where a recruiter can set up knockout questions if the ATS is enabled to do that. Not every ATS is. Not every business group, recruiting team, organization has permission to use those things. The way that my company operates in the UK is going to be different than it operates in the US, which is different than it operates in, any other country, right? So there's state, local, federal guidelines that also come into play here. But this is where we're going to include those knockout questions. This is where we're going to include any other, do we need to trigger an assessment or a writing sample, or like what are the process steps for when we start collecting applications? We can't change that midstream. And again, that goes back to compliance, right? So if I say, well, here's these 3 specific requirements that we're expecting, these are the 3 basic qualifications. If my hiring manager says, I want to add a 4th, actually, I want to make sure that they also have this other thing. Guess who's shutting down the role and reopening it? We can't edit those things after a requisition has been published. It now becomes a brand new job. So it's really, really important that we have a deep conversation about this. We are all on the same page. We are clear that we are looking for exactly what we say we're looking for, because we can't go back and change that. All right, so now all those steps have been done. I've just spent almost 10 minutes walking through what it takes to open a role. At this point, it now goes through the approval process. The approvers hopefully all say yes to everything that we've added there, and a role is now public for you to go and apply to. What happens next? Glad you asked. We're going to dig into that part next week.